32. In question 32, it says that we may need to use some factoring to help us out with some questions. So, I mean, it's pretty easy for me to know that this one needs factoring because it specifically says factoring. But what kind of stands out about this question that would make me think it was factoring anyway is just how it has these three different terms like that. And it's kind of like it's a quadratic. So let's see. In algebra 2, you would factor something like x squared minus 5x plus 4. And so you were trying to unfoil. There's a lot of different ways for you to have learned factoring, but most of the time, just for time purposes, you just want to do guess and check. You're trying to unfoil it. So x times x would foil to give me x squared. Minus 4 times a minus 1 would give me a positive 4. And within FOIL, the outer part of FOIL and the inner part of FOIL combine to give me minus 5x. Well, if you can do that factoring, then you can do this factoring. I know it looks a little bit harder, but it's really kind of set up the same way. So let me erase this to give myself a little more space. E to the x plus 4. Okay. So I'm going to try to solve this with factoring. So I could say e to the x times e to the x gives me e to the 2x. And for the same reason, minus 1 times a minus 4 multiply to be a positive 4. And if I was to FOIL this out, the outer part of FOIL would be minus 4 e to the x. The inner part of FOIL would be minus 1 e to the x. And those combine to be minus 5 e to the x. Okay, so on the made up question I had just a second ago that fits the same format here, if it had factored as an x minus 1 and an x minus 4 in algebra 2, then you could just figure out where this equals 0 or where this equals 0, because 0 times anything is what gives you 0. So you figure out where this equals 0, and you figure out where that equals 0, and you ended up with two answers. Okay, well, we need to do the same thing. I need to figure out where does e to the x minus 1 equal 0, and where does e to the x minus 4 equal 0. I'm still trying to figure out what value of x makes those equal to 0. Okay, so now that it's factored and I set each factor equal to 0, it looks more like some of the more beginning questions. We could add 1 over here, add 4 over here. We could switch this from exponential form to logarithmic form by switching the 1 and the x and adding log, switching the 4 and the x. So here's our answers. X equals the natural log of 4, and x equals the natural log of 1. But technically natural log of 1, now this one's some weird nasty decimal, so I'd say I'm probably finished with that one. But natural log of 1 is really a property that we should memorize, because it's really just saying e to what power gives you 1, and that has to be 0. Anything to the 0 power gives you 1. And since that one's not a messy decimal, we should really change that. So there are our two answers for that one.